एक सेकंड यूट्यूब लाइव स्टार्ट करो
ফেসবুকটা বন্ধ করতে হবে না তুই আগে আগে একটা ইউটিউবটা বলে নে শুরু শুরু হয়ে যাবে
Good evening everyone. I would like Professor Kaushik Basu sir to start our session. Now I will hand over Principal ma'am to take over the session. Principal ma'am, may I?
Yeah, thank you, Ruksha. Firstly, a hearty welcome to Honorable and Distinguished Speaker, Professor Kaushik Basu, sir. I also welcome all participants who have come and joined us across the world, and all who have come from different walks of life. I'm sure sir needs no introduction, yet I would like to share some of his achievements. Professor Kaushik Basu is an Indian economist and a C-marked professor of international studies at Cornell University. He was formerly Senior Vice President and Chief Economist of the World Bank in 2012 to 16. And prior to that, Chief Economic Advisor to the Indian government 2009 to 12. Professor Basu received his PhD and MSc Economics from the London School of Economics. In May 2008, he was awarded one of India's highest civilian award, the Padma Bhushan, by the President of India. He has received honorary doctorates from several institutes and universities from all over the world. Professor Basu has published extensively in development economics, game theory, welfare economics, and industrial organization. Professor Basu has held visiting positions at the Institute of Advanced Study, Princeton, the London School of Economics, Harvard University, Princeton University, MIT, and many more. At this juncture, I would take the advantage of sharing that he is our chief mentor of Nandrita. No doubt he is a part of the Felix family. He has spent precious time interacting, discussing, talking with our children, teachers, and other members. We feel very obliged from the core of our heart. Today, respected sir will discuss and enlighten us on the topic economics in everyday life and role of ethics. Sir, the session is yours. Please, sir.
Thank you very much, Principal Madam. I'm seeing lots of friends. Ranjana and Bharati are there. I see Ashokda, and there are lots of names, people whom I've met during my several visits to Para, Purulia, Nanritam. It's really a pleasure to be talking to you. But as people who know me also know, my first preference would have been to be there and have the conversation so that even after the talk, you can interact before and after. But we are living in an age of Zoom. We have not very much choice on that. So with that, let me jump right in. I was advised that this is meant to be a lecture for beginners of economics, people going into this. However, there are school students, there are college students, and there are professors and teachers. In other words, the instruction to me was a very, very difficult one. Try to give a lecture on economics, which will appeal to this mixed bag. And I thought what I will do is give you a little bit of the background of economics as a discipline, economics as a career. Also, one topic in economics that is not addressed very much, the role of ethics and morals. I want to bring that in after I've described some of the foundational questions of economics. And there is a reason why ethics and morality does not come into mainstream economics much. For one, it's very, very difficult to build it in properly, scientifically, but I will come back to that. Economics, one reason why economics, I should right away tell you, is a difficult subject, is a hard subject, it's a very strange mixture. Parts of economics is intuition and common sense. An intelligent person will understand as much as I will understand as a professional economist on that problem. Very often, since I worked in government, as Principal Madam just told you, I was the chief economic advisor, I would sit in meetings with top-notch bureaucrats, and on many matters of economic policy, you feel completely humbled. What I understand, they understand, and we are doing this together. But there are also parts of economics which are as precise as engineering, an engineering problem. And so economics has this very strange mixture from a very wide, popular, commonsensical side of the discipline to parts which are technical, like engineering, like some of the natural sciences, which also makes it a problem that lots of people talking about economics, you don't quite know who understands, who does not understand because of the strange breadth of the language. Let me give you one example right away before I get into the discipline. When I worked in India as advisor, we were facing many problems where I'm completely on par with others debating, discussing. One area where I know economics is developed phenomenally, but India does not put good use to that, is pricing of a product that you're trying to sell. So suppose, and in my time, it was actually the 3G spectrum was going to be sold by the government on the market. An easier example for people who, like me, don't understand that kind of technology, think of yourself selling a great work of art, an old painting of Picasso, a painting of Rabindranath Tagore, you're selling it on the market. How does the government typically in the old-fashioned way would do it? You try to price the product and then sell it to whoever's willing to pay that price. But for lots of products, you don't know how much people value it. Some people value it hugely, some people value it very little. If you in the government do the valuation and sell it, you may undersell it. So you may want to design an auction. An auction design is a mathematical discipline, and it's a phenomenally exciting discipline. How you design the auction, you can extricate more money from people who are trying to buy. The spectrum auction was a lovely example. We had valued it sitting in government, one segment of the auction, as $7 billion. If we sold it, we would have sold it for $7 billion to some business house. But we decided to auction it, and the auction had to be designed very, very carefully. And this was one of the lovely achievements, that it was a very well-designed auction that the Indian government did. In fact, we got tribute from around the world that it was like building a bridge. It was a masterly auction. What we, sitting in government with the top experts, had valued at $7 billion and would have sold it for $7 billion was bought for $15 billion. Once we did the auction, we realized people were valuing it more. So if we had sold it off, some business house would have got the benefit of buying a $15 billion product for $7 billion. It would not be corruption. We just undersold it. Someone made mega profits out of that. Auction design is like engineering. And I don't have the time today. There are some parts of it I could explain even to senior school students as to how you design auctions. But there are other policies which are a very mysterious combination of half intuition, half common sense, some looking at data, and then trying to devise policies. So that's what makes the subject hard. The origins. I want to tell you a little bit about the origins of economics. The economics as a discipline, most people treat it as, it begins in 1776. Some of you will know what I'm referring to. 1776 is Adam Smith's famous book, The Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith published it in 1776. That book became a classic. That was the birth of modern economics. But like every discipline, there are earlier thoughts and earlier thoughts. There are intelligent human beings, thinking human beings who go back far into history. Around 350 BC, there is Xenophon in Athens. The word economics comes from oeconomics. And Xenophon is writing about economics, oeconomics. Xenophon's economics is household economics. How do you make calculations to maintain your cattle, your farm, etc.? Around the same time, there is Kautilya, Chanakya, Arthashastra, the laws of wealth. Chanakya is delving into economics, and he's doing it with a Machiavellian mind. He's advising the king, the emperor, how to do economics right, fiscal policy right. He's got some insights. And if you come through history all the way up to Adam Smith, there are breakthroughs happening. One mistake we must not make, and I feel we very often do, is we get oversold about the achievements in the past, and we keep saying it was all done in the past. That is not the case. In the past, there were deep thinkers who made important breakthroughs. But any scientific discipline, you have to be ready to dismiss ideas of the past as, yes, it was a major breakthrough which brought us forward, but we now know better. And even with Adam Smith, we now know better than Adam Smith. Adam Smith gave us a landscape of viewing the economy. One little footnote, no relevance to economics, but I find it very interesting how so much of life is luck. The history of economics would have been totally different if something had happened to Adam Smith at the age of 3. Adam Smith was kidnapped at the age of 3 by a group of gypsies. Very luckily, he was rediscovered by an uncle and brought back home. I keep thinking if Adam Smith vanished with the gypsies, the history of economics would have been different. Someone else would have discovered the same principles, but it would have been slower and it would have been different. What did Adam Smith find? I want to give you a very quick, by the way, over here, I was thinking I also wanted to talk, but time is short. Others before Adam Smith, there is Aquinas, the religious thinker with very deep insights. Ibn Khaldun with deep insights about how the economy runs. But I have to start at Adam Smith for reasons of time. Adam Smith's big discovery was, I saw the questions that Ranjana and Bharati sent me today, some of the questions that are arising in people's minds. And it arises in our minds. I can see Shomurda over here. Questions which come up. You look at the product market. One particular price is spiking. The price of onions going up. You wonder why that is happening. There is a period of inflation, hyperinflation. You wonder what is causing this. But there is also something else to wonder, that there are lots of things which go wrong in the economy, and we do wonder about that. But one of the mysteries about the economy is many things also go right. We don't pay attention to that. And among the things that go right is, just think of it. When you sit down in the evening, you sit down to eat in the evening, your food arrives, the food has been farmed, the vegetables have been farmed by some farmer. The farmer couldn't care less about your welfare, but made food for you. You're wearing clothes and sitting over there, some tailor has made the clothes for you to wear. You're sitting in a house, someone has built the house. Is it a charitable society? Everyone trying to help everyone else? Adam Smith realized, and everyone realized, no, human beings don't look that charitable. The farmer is not sitting and thinking, how will I feed Kaushik Basu or Shamor Bagchi, and that's why I will make food. No, the farmer is thinking, I have to feed myself, and I'm tilling my crop and I'm selling it. The tailor is thinking, I have to feed my family and myself, I'm making clothes. But they arrive where they are needed. So many things go wrong, but also many things go right. How is it happening? Are people charitable, or is it being a God directing it, or a dictator directing it, or a king directing it? How come everybody is playing the role to help one another? And Adam Smith got a flash of an insight. He called it the invisible hand. He said that there are situations in life where individuals looking after their own interest end up serving one another. This is a marvelous, stunning thought, that a lot of the order that you see in society owes to nothing else but individuals looking after their own interest creates a certain amount of order in society. This is called the invisible hand of the market. This is the contribution of Adam Smith, which became very famous, which also got misused very widely. Conservative, very right-wing groups started saying that Adam Smith has proved that just pure selfishness is good enough. You can get social order. Adam Smith did not show that. Adam Smith showed that there are situations in life where looking after your own interest amounts to serving the collective interest. There are situations in life where that can happen, which is a fascinating thought. And in fact, it was so paradoxical and fascinating, the fact that Adam Smith had also earlier written about morality, about ethics. Those things fell by the wayside. People were so excited by this discovery of Smith that became the core of economics. Adam Smith's writing is in plain English. It's a massive amount of writing in plain words. But to understand the market, how prices are being formed, why is this object more expensive than this object? Why? People were puzzling about it. They were trying to understand. There was already in the sort of, say, early 1830s, 40s, people were talking about maybe the price is determined by the labor content of a product. How much labor has gone into producing this, and how much labor has gone into producing this. Maybe that's what forms the price. But if you think hard enough, that is not the case. So it is a puzzle. The puzzle, the breakthrough about the formation of prices happens, there is a precise date. It is the 19th of February, we think. This is looking back at history. 19th of February, 1860. Stanley Jevons, English economist, British economist. He was a very modest, good human being. I like Stanley Jevons. Stanley Jevons makes a diary entry. Today, a thought has struck me, which makes me feel that the earlier writings in political economy are wrong. There is a different way of viewing how prices are being formed. And then Jevons himself, Leon Walras, the other great mathematical economist, they are beginning to write down Adam Smith's system mathematically and trying to describe how prices are formed in society and how the economy functions. You know, it's at one level, it's as fascinating as looking at the stars and trying to make sense of why do the stars move in certain directions. These people are trying to make sense of why does food go in one direction, clothes go in another direction, housing goes in another direction, why does innovation take place? Are there some underlying rules? So Walras and Jevons, I must tell you, history of economic thought is so fascinating. There was one person who had hit upon the same idea of Walras and Jevons earlier, but he had died a tragic, unknown character in Germany called Hermann Heinrich Gossen. Gossen had written a book where he began with a somewhat pompous line, "I will do for the human sciences what Copernicus did for the stars." But Gossen's work was undiscovered. Gossen lived a very miserable life. First of all, he could not take to research and writing because his father, from a relatively poor background in Germany, said, you can't waste time on research and thinking. You better do a regular paid job. So Gossen had to wait till his father had died before he could turn to his passion, which was just to shut the door and sit and think and write. Gossen did that. And Jevons made his discovery without being aware of Gossen, but later discovered that the work he was doing, part of it had been done many years before him. In fact, at least 7, 8 years before him by Gossen. And Jevons is a noble person. In the second edition of his book, he says, I'm not the first person who got that idea. Someone else had got it. But this is the tragedy. I don't even know if that person is still alive or dead. But I have seen his manuscript. By then, Gossen was dead and gone. Anyway, the breakthroughs are coming. It's written up, and economics, since there is a technical side and there is a practical, intuitive side. So for students who get interested in economics, some of the purely mathematically oriented people, students, there's a lot of scope for economics. Those who don't have an interest in mathematics, but want to understand the world, understand many things, aspects of the world, there is scope for that. But one footnote on mathematics I must put in over here. See, Walras wrote down the system that Adam Smith was describing in equations. But one thing that he could not do Walras could not explain whether the equilibrium that was being described by Adam Smith exists or not. Whether such a complex equilibrium, where the demand for food meets the supply of food, demand for shoes meets the supply of shoes, the demand for something else meets the supply of that, this whole equation system, will there be a solution to it? This turned out to be a very, very difficult problem. It was solved in 1954 by Kenneth Arrow and Gerard Debreu. For that, you needed mathematics, very difficult mathematics. And the mathematics that you needed there was actually a theorem proved by a Japanese mathematician called Kakutani's fixed point theorem. You needed that. And this is quite fascinating. Arrow, who was thinking about Adam Smith's problem, Walras's problem, and trying to prove the existence of an equilibrium, was not being able to do it. But then Arrow saw that 2-3 years earlier, one man in game theory had taken a result from mathematics and solved the problem of game theory. And here I'm referring to John Nash. Many of you would have heard of John Nash. John Nash was one of the founders of game theory, dramatically important character, and again, a character of powerful results and tragedy. His contribution to economics and mathematics, 3 papers in economics, 2 or 3 papers in mathematics, were all written before his age of 29. And the reason is, from the age of 29, schizophrenia claimed him. His mind was completely gone. I mean, he became a schizophrenic, in and out of mental homes. His big contribution was done. I must put in a footnote over here. I met John Nash twice. And my second meeting with him was fascinating. I was very, very nervous, I have to tell you. John Nash, after his life of schizophrenia, in his relative old age, got into remission. He became, the schizophrenia was gone. He never recovered the sharpness of his mind anymore, but the schizophrenia was gone. And as you probably know, he got the Nobel Prize for economics. Celebrity character. There is a popular Hollywood film called The Beautiful Mind. It is about John Nash. I was in Mumbai. There was in 2003, in January, there was a very major conference where they had brought in Mumbai. John Nash was there, Amartya Sen, Amartya, my PhD advisor, was there, Roger Myerson, Robert Aumann from Israel, top-notch several Nobel Prize winners. There were the big lectures in an auditorium in Mumbai, and lots of people from Bollywood had come to listen to John Nash because they had watched the film about John Nash. They had come for that. Then the next day, there were smaller sessions, and I was giving a small technical paper in a small session in a small room. When I rose at the blackboard to give the lecture, I suddenly saw John Nash walking in to listen to my lecture. He came in and sat in the front row. And I was very nervous. I thought, with John Nash sitting in the front row, for me to be giving my whole lecture, and I would be using Nash equilibrium, to be teaching Nash equilibrium to John Nash, made me very nervous. But I need not have been nervous at all, because within 5 minutes, Nash fell asleep and he never woke up through my lecture. So he slept through my full lecture and I was completely at peace. This was the old John Nash. He had aged by then. So that was my second encounter. The first one was earlier. I won't waste time on that. Okay, so this is the economics progressing. Arrow and Debreu, they come up with their major breakthroughs. Let me tell you a little bit about economies crashing. We do get troubled by problems, but history of economics is full of crashes in the economy, which we did not understand. There are many things we understand better now. Overall, the modern economy worldwide is managed much better than the economy historically, because our understanding has improved, but there are still risks. Let me give you a few examples of economic calamity. One of the biggest calamities, and much has been written about it, is inflation, hyperinflation. The world's most celebrated inflation, about which a lot has been written, is inflation in Germany in 1923. You've probably heard about this, the German hyperinflation. That is almost the world record. The world's greatest inflation was in Hungary in 1946, but the Hungarian hyperinflation was very specific. It was the Second World War which had actually triggered that hyperinflation. But let me for a moment pause at the German hyperinflation. You know, inflation is very painful. And I've been in government. I know that when inflation takes place, you try to put all your attention to controlling inflation. But I should immediately point out, inflation control cannot be done overnight. Once inflation triggers off, you need a lot of very carefully devised policies to slowly bring the inflation down. If you try to bring the inflation down overnight, you will crash the economy. It's a very big problem. But our understanding of inflation improved hugely after 1923, the German hyperinflation. The German hyperinflation is a dramatic story. We fret about inflation, rightly so, when prices rise. But you know, in Germany, prices were rising such that in restaurants, they were changing the prices on the board 3 times a day. So during the day, the prices of food is going up and the restaurants are raising price. So if you're sitting down to have coffee, people would insist, I first pay the price instead of drinking coffee, rather than drink my coffee and then ask for the bill, because the price could climb. And there was at the peak of the inflation, what would cost 1 mark after a year became not 10 marks, not 100 marks, but you put 23 zeros after that. So people would take bags full of money and pay. Basically, the economy crashes. It's not there anymore. Our understanding of inflation improved the hard way. The Great Depression of starting in 1939 and for about 9-10 years it continues, peaking in 1933. Developed countries, rich countries, suddenly people are without jobs. It's totally crashing. We now understand that much better. John Maynard Keynes, one of the greatest thinkers in economics, his ideas are born out of the Great Depression, how to handle a depression like that. And today, nowadays, we know how to use fiscal policy, monetary policy to counter a major depression coming and tackle that. One more example, China. The world's biggest recorded famine. There have been many famines in the world, and maybe in history, in biblical times, there were worse famines, but statistically recorded famines, the biggest famine in the world is 1960-61 in China. How did the famine take place? The famine, I think it's now very clear, one of the greatest contributions on the understanding of famines is Amartya Sen. Amartya Da has written on famines extensively, including his own experience as a child in the Bengal famine, and subsequently he studied other famines and written about it. The Chinese famine is a staggering famine. Mao Zedong, authoritarian power at that time, in 1959 starts the movement of Great Leap Forward. China is going to leap forward and take over the world. He crushes the laws of the market, creates communes, great ideas. He's trying to put them into practice, and because he's so powerful, there is no one to stop him, no one to give him a little bit of advice that maybe you're making a mistake. He pushes through the Great Leap Forward, and the Great Leap Forward becomes the cause of the biggest famine. We now understand the Chinese famine very well. It was a human-made disaster. That what was made worse was, being an autocratic leader, no one had the courage to tell Mao Zedong that the economy was beginning to crash. People around Mao Zedong would tell him that, no, it's all going fine. Your Great Leap Forward is moving fine. Even when people were dying, the reports that were going back to Mao Zedong were all full of praise for Mao Zedong. So Mao Zedong is sitting over there getting praise about the Great Leap Forward. Gradually, it became so big that you realize that the whole economy is crumbling. 30 to 40 million people had died, perished by hunger. That gave us another form of learning. Fortunately, the learning has taken place through subsequently, fortunately is not the right word. Fortunately, we've taken wisdom out of these unfortunate incidents, and we understand many of these things better. I wanted to tell you about today's challenges and what do we do, and to take on some of those, you do need to bring something that got pushed aside in economics, the role of morals and ethics. I'll tell you personally, I feel many things are going wrong in the world, but one of the things going wrong in the world is the level of inequality. The inequality in the world today is just shocking. A few people at the top owning disproportionate shares of the world's wealth, having income levels which are so high that most of us cannot even comprehend of those incomes. So few people that well off, with masses who are much poorer, vastly poor, and there are people who are actually just very, very poor, people below the poverty line, which is drawn very low. Below that, you can see them, you rarely meet them because our world is so segregated. I feel global inequality is unacceptable. Now, when we look back at today's world, if we manage to solve this problem, I think in future human beings will be as ashamed of our world today as we get ashamed when we look back at history and talk of the times of slavery, that how could human beings indulge in this kind of slavery and oppression? The worst forms of apartheid and racism, casteism in India, which is all still there a lot. I think casteism is something which should be totally out of the scene. We shouldn't twice discriminate against anybody on the basis of caste. But we've had dreadful forms of casteism. We now look back at those and say, how could human beings have been so mean? But we are living in a society which in many ways is exactly that mean. But to solve the problem, just being upset and angry is not good enough. You need to be upset, you need to be angry, but you also have to pause and say, what do we do? The question. And it is not easy. When you look at corruption, if you think that you can in one stroke remove the corruption, that is not right. We have seen, even in the case of India, the big mistake of the demonetization. That was one big stroke movement. But you cannot cure corruption through one big step movement without the many manifestations of it. The demonetization weakened the economy fundamentally and did not do anything to corruption. It's a very, very complicated problem, so you have to bring your mind to it. One of the things that got left behind in the analysis of economics is morals matter and ethics matter. And an economy does not run just on individual drive, greater profit. Our moral sense, our moral compass, and I should tell you that I'm not using moral sense in the sense of being religious or practicing a religion. You can practice any religion, you can practice no religion, and I know people of all kinds of religiosity or non-religiosity who have common basic morals, the moral of kindness, of empathy, of compassion. These are values that play a role, and economics, by looking at what is more exciting, mathematically challenging, push those things into the background. I wanted to give you examples of the role of morals, and I'm going to do it with one area where I have written and contributed. With a little bit of game, I referred to game theory earlier, and I want to give you an example with a game where if people were a little moral, you would have a much better outcome for the group. So let me try to explain to this, and I'm going to do something. Turn my computer around so that you can see I'm in my office room and you'll be able to see my blackboard. I was about to knock my coffee down. Luckily, that calamity has been avoided. So, okay. To make matters worse, we've got John Maynard Keynes keeping watch of what I'm writing. That was not a part of the planned intention, but I have a sketch of John Maynard Keynes done by Sanjoy Bhattacharya. Sanjoy Bhattacharya, the artist, did this sketch of John Maynard Keynes. Okay, I want to explain this game to you. Let me try to give you most of it in words. Actually, instead of that game, I'm going to begin with something else. In Ithaca, where I am, there is a bridge on Forest Home Drive. This bridge is a very narrow bridge. It's just 5 minutes from where I am. And actually, just this morning when I came into my office, I drove over that bridge. This is a very narrow bridge. Cars can pass only in one direction. Cornell is somewhere here, and a lot of housing and all is there, and the roads go like this. So cars come from this side, many cars, and cars come from this side. Remember, in America, cars drive on the right, but over this bridge, you can have only one car going, and there's no one manning the bridge. In many Western countries where you have cars merging, there is an automatic intuitive rule that has developed called the zipper rule. The zipper rule is one car goes and then let the car from the other side go, and then another car from this side and another car from this side. So one at a time, they're all joining up. If you, in Germany, when you're joining a highway, you'll have one car, another car from that side, another car from this side, they join up and they all go. If you use the zipper rule, it would be very inefficient in Ithaca. One car would go all the way here out, and then another car would go all the way here out. So what has happened is a little custom has developed. 3, 4 cars from this side, 3, 4, occasionally 5 cars will go away, and then 3, 4, 5 cars will go from here. No one monitors the bridge. A little bit of norm has developed. When you are here, when I'm driving here, 3, 4 cars ahead of me go, I just stop. And I let 3, 4 cars from that side come. And then one car stops there, another 3, 4 cars go from here. Just imagine if this was a society where everyone was completely selfish. You know, who knows who's driving? There's no policing. There's actually no strict rule. What would you do? You'd say, I won't stop. I'm going to tag behind the car in front and go. If everyone did that, for 1 hour, there would be traffic going in this direction. And then if by chance there was a gap, then these cars, having waited for 1 hour, would begin to go in that direction. The system would break down. I'm going to give you a story, which is a game that I had developed. And this game actually has now developed a bit of a literature. People have done tests in laboratories using the game I had developed. And the game illustrates the role of little bits of ethics and morals and how that can change the outcome of a game. Let me give the game to you very quickly and see if you follow. I'm again sitting down. I'm sorry, I'm flipping this back and forth. So the game is the following. 2 persons, I'm speaking and thinking whether I should give this game actually, let me give it to you quickly enough. And some of you may follow, some not, but let me try to give it to you very quickly. You have traveled somewhere and say you've returned to Delhi or to Kolkata. You've flown in to Calcutta. And 2 of you have come in with 2 little beautiful objects you had bought. Let us say 2 pieces of identical village craft, which got damaged in the airline baggage. And you go to the airline counter at the airport, in Kolkata airport, and you say that, look, you've damaged this, you have to pay us some compensation. And the airline manager says, I don't know what, this is a strange thing that both of you have bought. I don't know what the price of this is. So I'm going to compensate you in this manner. This is how I will compensate you. Both of you sit down, write down the price of this object that you've bought. And the price I'm giving, allowing you, you can write anything from 2 rupees to 100 rupees. But in integer, you can write 2, you can write 3, you can write up to 100. Both of you write down an integer. I will then look at the piece of paper you've given me. If both of you write the same number, I will give you that in rupees. So if both of you write 100, I'll give you 100. But if if you write different numbers, I will assume that the lower number is the honest price and the other person is trying to take extra money out of me. So this is how I will compensate you. If you write different numbers, I will pay both of you the lower number, but with one correction. The person who wrote the lower number is such a relatively good person, I'll give that person 2 extra rupees. And the person who wrote the higher number was trying to cheat me, I'll give that person the lower number minus 2 rupees as punishment. This is the game. The 2 players, 2 individuals are sitting at the airport and trying to think, how can I make money. Let us make them completely selfish. They want to make a lot of money. I've made the numbers from 2 rupees to 100 rupees. I could have made it 1,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees. That would just make it more complicated. So assume 2 rupees to 100 rupees. You can write down any number. If you both write the same, you'll get that. See, first thought may be, both of them being selfish, that first thought will be, good, we will both write 100, we will get 100 rupees. And let's say this object was very cheap, 5 rupees. So you say it's very good. We would have got 100 rupees from the airline compensation. So that person is sitting there, you're sitting here, you're saying, I'll write 100, that person will write 100, we will get 100 each. Then something should strike you. If you are really selfish, see, if the other person is writing 100, if you write 99, remember the compensation rule. The lower of the two plus 2 rupees as reward for writing a lower number. So if the other person is writing 100, if you write 99, you will get 99 plus 2, 101 rupees. So it should strike you, if you're completely selfish, I'll write 99 and I'm going to get 2 extra rupees, I'll get 101. But then it will strike you, and it will strike you suddenly. The other person is also intelligent and selfish. By now, the other person must have thought, the other person will also write 99 by trying to cheat me. And both of us will end up writing 99. If both of us write 99, of course, I won't get 101, I will get 99. Because if both write the same number, you get the same amount. So then you say, you're thinking yourself, no conversation. Well, we will both get 99. What else do I do? If he writes 99, there's nothing I can do. But then it suddenly strikes you. If he writes 99, I can write 98. Why? Because then I'll get 98 plus a reward of 2. I'll jump back to 100. But then it should strike you, the other person would have figured this out. The other person must be writing 98. If both write 98, we'll get 98. But then I can do a bit better by going to 97. But then the other person will go to 97. In the end, in this game, which I had called the traveler's dilemma, if both are ruthlessly selfish and mean, they will write 2 each and get 2 rupees each. The outcome collapses altogether. You do very, very badly. The traveler's dilemma has been used now, and there have been laboratory tests checking by actual payment to people. How do people play? Fortunately, human beings are not that mean. They tend to do better. They write higher numbers and pick up more, but some people do write 2. There are all kinds, and the empirical result on this is very large. But this, I had written the game long time ago as a little illustration of little bit of personal sacrifice. If I was not being that selfish, for that 1 additional rupee, I will ditch the other person. We both, if we were like that, both of us would have done much better. But now we did worse by being totally selfish. But I'm just getting into this with the following reminder. I'm taking a little bit longer than I had planned. Another 5 minutes, does that sound all right? Yeah, because I also do want to take in a few questions and talk about it. Now, you know, the role of ethics is not an easy one. People very often say that by being moral, will I be better off? In some cases, yes, by being moral, you'll be better off, but that is not always the case. And if by being moral, you are always better off, we would not need morality. Just being selfish would have made you moral. Moral is being prepared to make some sacrifice. That I know I'm going to do a little bit worse, but for the sake of keeping my word, for the sake of honesty, I will take that little hit. Moral is these little compromises that you're willing to make. The trouble is, in a society of moral human beings, such societies tend to do better. And let me, the reason I said the trouble is, I'll explain just now. There are studies which show that if there is trust in society, for trust, you also need trustworthiness. You can trust people. And it's a trusting society. That society tends to do better. There is a study by Francis Fukuyama comparing societies. There are some societies where there's a lot of trust. Scandinavian societies, Nordic societies, there's a lot of trust. I'm doing you a favor. I'm doing this job for you. Will you please pay me after 7 days? You know the person will pay you. That immediately facilitates trade and exchange. And Fukuyama was pointing out that actually, you know, societies with greater trust, tend to do better. And I should tell you, trust and trustworthiness is not hardwired into us. There is nothing genetic. And I personally believe we human beings are very, very similar. Genetically, fundamentally, we are similar creatures, no matter what our race, what our religion, what our gender orientation, we are fundamentally very similar. But through our life's experience, the interaction, history, we begin to behave differently. And actually, I've done some paper writing on behavioral differences which look hardwired. Some societies are punctual, some societies are unpunctual. With a co-author, we try to argue that this is not because of fundamental differences, but we've got into a societal equilibrium. That is my best behavior in my society, and we are in that equilibrium. Likewise, a society that manages to develop trust does better. But here is the big challenge of corruption. In a trusting society, one person who is mean and not trustworthy tends to do better. The reason is that person will cheat others, whereas everyone is trusting one another, the scope for cheating increases. So the cheats will tend to do better. This is the challenge of life. And that's why, in the end, not cheating has to be a matter of principle, a matter of my commitment that I do not cheat people. Because individually, you can't appeal to individual rationality. In fact, there's a question I saw that if I'm just good, won't I do badly? It is true you will do badly, but this is the paradox. When a group of people make a collective commitment that we are going to follow this rule on the bridge that I was showing, I will stop a little, take a little bit of suffering, and the other will take, the group does better. But it is also true that the cheat on this bridge example, the person who always cheats and tags on to the car behind will save a few minutes of time every day, will be better off that way. But that is the dilemma. The complexity of the relationship between morals and ethics and society doing, I have no doubt about it, that as a society, if you develop certain basic morals and ethics, it's good for society. But cheats, individuals who are cheats tend to do better financially and economically very often. This is the big paradox and a dilemma. How do you solve this? There is one discipline in economics which goes into it in great depth, which is called welfare economics and social choice theory. Actually, I'm glad I hadn't planned to mention this, but I'm doing the two biggest names in the world in welfare economics and social choice theory. The biggest name is Kenneth Arrow, and the next most prominent name is Omurto Sen. Omurto does early work, which is very different from the work he does now, is axiomatic welfare economics. You literally, in the spirit of Euclidean geometry, you're writing down axioms and you're deriving certain results about individual axioms and collective behavior. And there are some economists who have actually done work completely in their Euclidean style. Gerard Debreu is the biggest name. But welfare economics is a discipline that goes into this. The interface between morality and economics is a very complex one. Just by being upset and angry and saying we have to do something about it, you will not be able to solve it. You need to bring your mind to it. And let me just close by a few words for students who are getting into economics as a career. You know, economics is a very strange discipline, as I was saying. For me, just the scientific fascination, looking at order in society or disorder and trying to understand, I have to confess that that just totally grips me. I want to understand that. Without whatever the end is, I want to just understand that. That itself, most research careers are that kind. You get gripped by that. Economics, of course, has one foot in reality. What you do can contribute to a better society and a better world. So there is this range. For people who are coming into the discipline of economics, if your interest is in technical mathematical work, there is a branch of economics which does a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm sitting here in Ithaca, Cornell. There is a colleague of mine who's retired, Mukul Majumdar, and Topon Mitra, who died prematurely. Absolutely brilliant minds of pure mathematical economics, just elegant writing up of these descriptions and the economy. People who are interested in very practical problems of solving a problem of the world, just looking at a policy problem, taking on economics as scope for that. I don't want to oversell the discipline. The world is full of very, very exciting disciplines, from physics, mathematics, logic, philosophy, to literature, writing, poetry. These are all disciplines that you can do. But economics as a career choice does give you a lot of room because it has this range. And depending on your orientation, you can go into different branches of economics. And also, this is a discipline where unsolved problems are galore. We understand corruption a little bit, but not fully. I wish I had time. Corruption is one of those challenges where you should get angry when you see corruption. But if you think just being angry, you can solve corruption, that is not true. Corruption is an intricate problem that is woven into the fabric of society. You have to bring your mind to it, to think of laws very, very carefully constructed, whereby you begin to cut down corruption. So there are huge challenges. It's an exciting discipline. And some of you who come into the discipline, you'll be welcome. And I'm sure our paths will cross. I've gone over much more than I had planned to. Let me stop now.
I would request our chairperson, respected Mr. Ashok Mohan Chakraborty, to continue with the question answer session. Sir, would you please?
All of us are very grateful to Professor Basu for his illuminating talk. Earlier also, I had the privilege of listening to Professor Basu on several different platforms. Professor Basu is a vastly learned person. He has hands-on experience on day-to-day intricate problems of economics and social sciences. And the best part of it is, he can relate to the audience at different levels. I have listened Professor Basu talking to a group of eminent social scientists. I was also present when Professor Basu visited the Felix School of Education and had very interesting one-to-one discussion with the students of class 5 and 6. Professor Basu, we are very grateful to you, and I have always felt that Professor Basu creates curiosity in your mind and encourages us to do further studies on the topics raised by him in his lecture and do small researches at our level. Thank you, sir. We'll be looking forward to sharing a platform with you at the earliest opportunity again. Now, lots of questions have come. Some of these questions, I would think, Professor Basu had discussed in his talk. We have questions from practicing economists, from teachers of economics, from school children, and also from intelligent readers of national events. With your permission, may I read out some of the questions? With your permission, I will read out some of the questions, Professor.
Yeah.
Mr. Shomor Bakshi has raised a question. Despite good master crops and nearly constant demand, why has the mustard oil prices doubled between January 2020 and today? Why are the other edible oils showing an identical sympathetic trend? Sir.
This particular question, Shomurda, is the heart of a lot of studies of famines, where we do know that after an adequate amount of production, prices still begin to rise. It can happen for a variety of reasons. Some which are relatively direct is plain simple hoarding, that there are traders who decide that if we hoard some of this, then price will rise and I'll be able to sell later. And once you begin to do that, other traders catch on. It may be one big player or it may be several who are doing it. If it is a process of this kind that is taking place, usually the right technique, which is usually in a deficiency in a country like India, is you want to have, one is you can interact by bringing in an anti-hoarding law that you're not allowing people to hoard above a certain amount. So if there is a glut of production, you're bringing that on the market. The other thing that very often does it, and actually I have a little bit of experience directly in government with this, is if there are very few traders in this product, they are going to soon collude. They will chat in the evening when they meet, 5 of them, they will say that, look, let's hold back this production. There's been a big supply of production. Let's hold back some of this, the price will rise, and then we are going to make money. The way you break it up is by stopping cronyism. You don't allow just a few producers. If you ensure that there is competition, and that is what antitrust law or pro-competition law in a country plays a role for, is you create competition among these many players, you will begin to bring this down. Another thing, Shomuda, without knowing the details of what has happened, there are certain times and situations where one group of people, and these may not be profiteers, begin to get worried and they do hoarding. They step up on their personal individual hoarding, and that can exacerbate the problem and the prices elsewhere. We have one prominent historical example, the Bengal famine. When it was taking place, the government was providing reasonable buffer for the cities, and the relatively well-off people were stocking up a little bit more of the food. So though there was actually enough food for everyone, if the better off people in cities stock up double the amount of what they need because they are worried about the future, you can get prices shooting up in villages because there is a shortage being caused in villages. Here, no one is individually doing it to do profiteering by small businesses, individual profiteering. But you can also get it by just ordinary people trying to stock up a little bit more. In the case of India, I don't know the details, but I do know that there has been a general lack of empathy for ordinary people in the way policies are being crafted. Too much of it is businesses are important. You do want businesses to function. But if your governing principle becomes only to support business houses, you are paying no attention to the well-being of the people. But beyond that, I don't know enough of the microeconomic details of this to tell you exactly what is happening in this case.
Thank you, Professor Basu. Please allow me to read out the next question. This is from Marine Mukherjee. Does knowledge of ethics hold me back in striking bargains with the market? Every day, we operate in an imperfectly competitive market. Every day, we engage into bargains with the market. With access to information, I am privileged to have deals with the market to my advantage. But knowing ethics, would that be disadvantageous? Because that would pull me back to have those deals which are not always very ethical, moral.
Yeah, Mary, that's a very good question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the answer to that is actually in many ways, it's a brutal truth about life. That is true. If you are using a standard of ethics stronger than others are using, you will lose out. And you have to take a decision whether you are going to sit back and say, yes, I lose out, but I'm not going to break these little moral principles that I have, or I'll go along and I'll do it. I don't have an answer to this. This is the challenge of economic life, that if everybody stood by those ethics, you would have a better society. That bridge I drew is a trivial example, but life is full of examples. If a collective society that has learned to trust one another and not cheat, that society does better, prospers, growth takes place. But if everybody else is cheating, what do? My advice to you will be still to be the ethical person and take losses, but I can't give you the false comfort that you will do well if you are the only person who is standing back. I like to believe personally that I would take a loss rather than give in to certain basic ethical standards, but you will have to take a loss. If that was not the case, the word for ethical behavior would not be ethical behavior. It's selfish behavior would be ethical, but that is the challenge. You've pointed to a very, very deep question. And for me as an economist, I get this kind of a question excites me because I feel it's also a researcher's question. How do you create a society where people will not have to face the dilemma? You're pointing to a genuine dilemma. That dilemma arises. And early writers, I'm thinking of Scottish Enlightenment, David Hume, writes about how once a society imbibes some of these values collectively, the society will begin to prosper. How do you inject that into society is a challenge. So it's an incomplete answer, but it is a difficult question. I don't have a better one.
Professor Basu, now there is a question from Shaptarshi. He is a student of grade 8 in Felix School of Education. He still cherishes the memory of his interactions with Professor Basu some 3 or 4 years back when Professor Basu had kindly visited the school. Shaptarshi Chakravarti has asked why Indian economy is less than that of the Western countries, despite the fact that India is one of the richest countries in Asia. And when will India reach the economy level of US?
Shaptarshi, very good to meet you. From a long time ago, we had met in a group that time in the class. And I'm hoping while you're still in school, I'll be back there. So I'll get to see you again when I'm there next time. Shaptarshi, you know, the question you're asking is the big question. I was just now talking about Adam Smith. Those early writers were puzzling about why does one economy become well off and another economy does not become well off. First of all, on India, I should clarify, India is one of the richest Asian economies in terms of total income. If you look at per capita income, by taking the total income of the country and dividing by the population, so each individual's average income, India is not the richest in Asia. Asia, in fact, has some of the world's richest countries now: Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, part of China now. There are these countries which are actually almost, some of the are like Western countries in terms of average income. India is not there. But one footnote I will give to your question: depending on the policies you follow, how the fate of a country can change. You know, Korea now is about 20 times richer than India. The average Korean is about 20 times richer. In 1950, Korea and India was the same. Korean per capita income and India was at the same level. And in fact, most Western observers were predicting that India will take off and Korea will not take off. But Korea took off. Korea is now 22 times richer. But your question is, what is it that makes a country richer and better off? There are two things. Part of it is to do with policies. And policies can be right or wrong. People don't make deliberate mistakes, I like to believe. But mistakes take place because we don't know what is the best policy. We are trying to find our feet and we are adopting some policies. But a lot of it is not just policies. Our social norms play a very important role. Economics does not give enough importance to that. I feel East Asian countries develop trust within their society very early. They became trusting societies. Once you become trusting societies, the question that was earlier asking, Marine was asking, Once you become a trusting society, you can begin to take steps which collectively does better. How do you become a trusting society? We don't know. And that's an open topic. But in terms of economic policy, we do know many things. And I can tell you, these are tough examples. There are big policy mistakes that we can make. I, for instance, believe that the way our farm laws, the recent changes that have been made, are very wrong. You'll be paying into the hands of 3-4 big business houses that will get the benefit of these reforms. So a lot of it depends on how you're crafting the law, how you're designing. In the case of India, India's growth rate had picked, even now, though we've gone through a very bad phase, India's growth rate had picked up. And till a few years ago, it was appearing that yes, India is still not there, but India is growing so rapidly, we will reach over there. But over the last few years, growth has been very poor. It's a combination of policy mistakes, but economics is a complicated discipline. It's very easy to just point a finger and say, you caused it, but we don't know. Complex reasons, and it's an invitation to the subject to try to understand the kind of question you're raising. And next time I'm there, we can sit and talk at greater length on this.
Thank you, Professor Basu. Let us know when you visit Para next time and you clarify the mind of Shaptarshi, because I would also like to be there then. Mr. Devadeep Purohit has sought for Professor Basu's comments on. His question is, in the Indian context, don't you think the government's denial to admit that the economy is doing badly is immoral and unethical? I ask this question by taking your cue that societies that are moral are better off.
Devadeep, good to see you. I think it is unfortunate because, this is one area where India stood out in terms of the honesty and transparency of our data and numbers. And this I can tell you from the time when I was at the World Bank, and data would pour in from all over the world. And World Bank was the storehouse of a lot of economic data. I used to feel very proud about the Indian data. Even when India is doing badly on something, you would get very, very good data. And India's data collection, since you're raising about the transparency of data, India is a world pioneer in economic data collection. And the credit goes back to Prashanto Mahalanobis, introducing techniques of data collection which the Western world had not done. And this is a tribute which, as an Indian, people will say, of course you will say that, but you can read Angus Deaton pointing to the contribution of Mahalanobis for world data collection. So it is a bit unfortunate. It is always in the interest of the political leadership that when things go wrong, you try to not allow that data to be visible. But I feel it's a very, very grave mistake, because once you begin to hide data, first of all, India's reputation you're harming, because India was known for a country with very transparent data. We may make mistakes, but our data is very transparent. But also, once you begin to hide the data, problems get accentuated without corrective measures taking place because you're covering up the data. I'll give you one example which is troubling me a lot: vaccines. India has done well in terms of vaccines for the relatively elite population. And by relatively elite population, all of you listening to me, I'm referring to all of us. Virtually all people who are listening to me, all of you would have been vaccinated. And the people who work in your house, those people would have been vaccinated. But if you look at the percentage of India's population that is fully vaccinated, India has, yesterday I looked at the data, 109 countries are ahead of India. And here, data is not being covered up. Every now and then you get data being shown about the absolute number of people who have been vaccinated in India. India's population is large. In terms of the absolute number, of course, India will be right on top in the world. You have to look at the percentage of India being fully vaccinated. And there are 109 countries ahead of India, which is embarrassing because India has a past record of excellent capacity to vaccinate the country. And I feel the first thing to do over here is to be completely transparent. that yes, we are taking on big numbers, we are vaccinating. But in terms of percentage of population, we are doing poorly, and there's a lot of elitism that our cities and the elite groups are being vaccinated, but a lot of the rural areas, especially in northern India, in stretches of also eastern India, the rural vaccination has been very poor. So yes, I mean, this is one, in fact, India's strength, and we are beginning to slide on that, which is very unfortunate. I hope we will have the sense, the ethical commitment to be transparent on this.
Do I have your permission, Professor Basu, to pose two more questions?
Now, let me take two more.
Your time permitting.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Gargi Mishra, she is a student of economics, has sought for Professor Basu's opinion. We very often hear from different quarters, and especially from political fields, that India is heading towards catastrophe, economically, educationally, etc. Recent farm laws passed by the parliament are negatively talked about. We, the young people, are saddened. What is your message to us? Is everything bad in India today? Sir.
Gayatri, the short answer to the last question is no. Not everything is bad in India. And also, are we heading towards a catastrophe? I don't think so. India, in many ways, is a very resilient country. So we are doing poorly. We are really doing poorly. One piece of number which I've been giving out quite a bit is, from 2016 in India, every year's growth has been less than the previous years. Such a long stretch of each year's growth being less than the previous years has never happened since India's independence. So we are doing badly. There's no doubt about that. Unemployment is shockingly high in India. Youth unemployment in particular is just a very bad situation, one of the worst in the world. So we are doing badly, but India is also a resilient country. So we will probably stumble along. I don't want to forecast the future. Who knows what will happen? I have also seen examples of countries, stable countries, then completely dissemble and collapse. I remember for me, Egypt. I did two visits. Once when I went to Egypt from the government of India, I was representing India, went for a meeting. I felt Egypt was a stable country, not well-off country, but a stable country like India. When 2 years later, I went back from the World Bank to Egypt, Egypt had changed. The uprising had taken place, there was chaos, and then there was the authoritarian hand, the country has changed. So the future is very difficult to predict. What saddens me about India is my expectation that till about 2015-16, actually India was on a very good path, despite all the problems. If you look at the world's writings, and this is not just the American government speaking about it, look at independent newspapers, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, the literature on writing on India was a lot of very positive writing. And India was actually, I have always felt proud, and this I still feel proud, that it's a country with remarkable qualities. We have discrimination and all, but India was striving to be an inclusive country. In many ways, it was like a modern, advanced economy, that we want a country which is an open country. We tolerate people's differences of all kinds. We let them in. We are a country with no religious discrimination. We want all people of all religions to stand together. With all these values and a free press, I used to take always great pride when I worked in Indian government. And I would tell the G20 people, other countries, that you will not find another emerging economy like India with the kind of press that India has. Every time outside the Ministry of Finance, journalists would come and grill me about something that is happening. Why is this going wrong? Why is that going wrong? And I felt proud that India has these traits like advanced economies. Where India was weak, India's economy was still weak. It was not like an advanced economy. But from, we don't quite know when, from maybe a little bit of takeoff takes place from 1994, then 2003, India is again beginning to grow very well. By 2005, India is growing among the fastest growing countries in the world. And the global writing on India is very, very positive. This is a country which is espousing values, modern values of inclusiveness, of tolerance, of freedom of speech, of democracy. And now it is also beginning to grow. I take pride in that India. Unfortunately, we are unwinding from that. My only hope is our values of tolerance, inclusion, these are very deeply imbued in us. Of free speech, the argumentative Indian is deep in us. And so ordinary people will see that we were on a path that we must not abandon. So I remain hopeful for India that our fundamentals are there and we will do better. But we are going through a very difficult phase, especially the unemployment situation is dramatically bad.
Professor Basu, I have already obtained Professor Basu's permission to raise one more question.
I'll take one more.
This is from Ashani Dasgupta. I wanted to understand if there is a thought experiment about traveler's dilemma in a completely altruistic society.
Ashwini, in a completely altruistic society, it depends a little bit on what you mean by altruism. Altruism has many different meanings. One is utilitarian. Other people's utility also matters to me. I'm concerned about that. If you take that kind or some variant of utilitarianism, altruism, we know what will happen in the traveler's dilemma. Actually, you will reach the optimal outcome. You will do better as a group collectively. But what happens if you are a reflective society, as you're saying, it's a thinking society without quite knowing what the thought is? Actually, there is a fascinating experiment which has been done by an Israeli economist, very well-known Israeli game theorist, Ariel Rubinstein. Rubinstein did the following experiment. He gave the traveler's dilemma to people to solve, and he was doing it on a computer. And he was looking at what answer people are giving and how much time it takes to get to that answer. And he found a fascinating correlation. Some people who take a lot of time to give the answer are coming down from 100 to a lower number. So cogitation leads to that. And some people who are giving a spot quick answers are giving an answer very close to 100. There are more nuanced. It's a full published paper on the role of cogitation, thought. So there is actually work on that, which is Rubinstein. You can see the paper. If you do Google search, you will find Rubinstein's paper on cogitation in economics. And then with the traveler's dilemma game, he gives that result. But what you will get with altruism, we know, is with altruism, you will get optimality. But the trouble is, you need the group to be altruistic. Otherwise, you'll do a little worse than the more altruistic. Then if you are more altruistic, you'll do worse than the selfish person. And that is the dilemma of selfishness and altruism. And not for a moment do I want to go away by telling you that we know what the solution is. Altruism, ethics, compassion are very important. But we do need our mind to it about how to spread these qualities in society so that the whole group does well and these values flourish. I personally believe that we should, as individuals, make commitment to these values no matter what it does to the economy. Compassion, kindness are good values. And our commitment to this should be not because these are instruments for achieving something else, but these are ends in themselves. But in running a whole society, you do need principles, values to get them forward. And that research agenda is an open research agenda.
Thank you, Professor Basu. Now, we have already used, taking advantage of Professor Basu's indulgence, we have already used more time in this question answer session than what was earlier agreed upon. On behalf of all of us, I express my gratitude to you, and we do hope that we will get an occasion very soon to have you at Para at Felix School of Education and learn more from you. Now, because of shortage of time, we could not raise several questions today, but I am sure there will be opportunities soon to have interactions with Professor Basu again. Thank you very much, sir. May I hand over the dais to the principal madam of this institution now to thank Professor Basu. Yes, madam. Thank you.
Sir, thank you is a very small word for such an discussion, so informative and interesting. But let me be a little informal or non-formal, whichever way. Actually, Bharati Di and Ranjana was saying that you'll be visiting us in December. If everything is fine, we are really waiting for you. We are eagerly waiting. My children, my team, and everybody here, all the members of Nandritam are eagerly waiting for you. Please do visit us very soon. Thank you, Chairman, sir, Chairperson, sir, and thank you, participants. Thank you, all those who have sent questions, but we could not discuss here. And all of you stay safe, be happy, take care, and thank you, a big thank you to my team members who did all the technical work here. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful being here. And for all of you, be well, be safe, and I hope to see you.
Thank you, Kaushikda, for spending a lot of time for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, Challam. Ashokda, thank you. I don't know if you're still there. I can see Shamurda over there. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, Bharati,
Everybody is here, but he is
Yeah.
here.
Okay, good. Chollam, কেমন আছো? Yeah.
খুব ভালো আছি. We have
Yeah.
been waiting for a long time for this session,
Yeah.
and we just so grateful to you. You have given so much time to us.
No, it has
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you.
And we'll meet in
Thank
person.
you. We'll talk later. Yeah.
Bye.